Hello, America, and welcome to the sixth episode of the American Restraint podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Trepanier, and I am excited to continue on this journey with you. Okay, before we get going, just a little recap for those of you who are new to the show. This is a podcast about how to fix America. It is largely based on my recent book, American Restraint, Taming Hyper-Individualism and Hyper-Capitalism. I believe the country is fundamentally divided and that the forces of hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism are largely to blame, and the fix is federalism. As usual, I ask for your review, subscription, comments, and sharing this podcast. It really helps get the word out about the show. Okay, so quick recap. The past couple of episodes we've done deep dives on both hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism. Today, we're going to go back in time as we discuss how these two powerful forces came together to define the 1980s. This episode is titled Reagan Revolution Remix. And a little note about my shirt today. I'm wearing a Back to the Future t-shirt. Here, better shot there. There you go. If you haven't seen this movie, see it. Seriously. One of the best movies ever made. This movie came out in 1985. The story goes back to the 50s to fix a few problems Michael J. Fox ran into in the 1980s. Similarly, we're going to go back to the 80s to address problems that need to be fixed in America right now in the 20s. All right. Let's go. As a high school student and a college student during the 80s, I leaned liberal like many other young people, which meant I instinctively didn't like Reagan. Looking back on the time, I mainly reacted to sound bites about how Reagan was anti-environmental, anti-social security, and too pro-nuclear weapons and pro-greedy capitalists. As I grew older and started a family of my own in the 1990s, I began to reconsider the Reagan Revolution. As I better understood how Reagan was trying to regrow the American economy and patriotism after the malaise of the 70s, I reconsidered what Reagan was trying to accomplish. I gradually came to believe that by promoting family values, Reagan was trying to halt the progress of hyper-individualism. And while I continued to be suspicious of how Reagan let Wall Street run wild in the 80s, I came to better appreciate his desire to shrink the government and to end the Cold War with Russia. However, as I was reading Why Liberalism Failed, a book that we've referred to a number of times on this podcast, I began another reconsideration of the Reagan Revolution. While I continued to agree with his positions on promoting cultural values, I began to see more of a disconnect between his social and economic policies. While Ronald Reagan was telling citizens that family values were at the center of the American dream, he was also giving carte blanche to American businesses to make whatever changes they needed to their businesses in search of ever greater profits. As American companies became more concerned with profits and global markets than they were with American workers, families, and communities, the cultural contradictions of capitalism became ever more apparent. Trickle-down economics, Wall Street speculative bubbles, and a laissez-faire approach to antitrust were key features of Reaganomics. While I think Reagan deserves credit for trying to halt the progress of hyper-individualism in America, his enablement of hyper-capitalism basically canceled out his family values policies. All right, so quick song break here. As you know, I love 80s music. We've already been talking about some 80s movies. The song Allentown by Billy Joel does a great job discussing the impact of hyper-capitalism on the country especially as the Rust Belt got hollowed out. All right, here's just a couple of lines from that song. Well, we're living here in Allentown, and they're closing all the factories down. Out in Bethlehem, they're killing time, filling out forms, standing in line. Well, we're waiting here in Allentown for the Pennsylvania we never found, for the promises our teachers gave, if we worked hard, if we behaved. So, why are we talking about the 80s today? I think the 80s are a pretty useful period to reflect upon because it is roughly midway between the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and today. Most Americans were more patriotic during that decade. As America moved into the 90s, however, the country became less patriotic and more divided. Over the past few decades, our national politics and our presidents have become more polarizing and less able to find a way to address hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism. And then, during the last decade, Donald Trump, certainly one of the most controversial presidents, has dominated the political scene. And the most interesting thing about President Trump is that he's such a contradictory figure. On the one hand, he perfectly combines hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism, if you look at his business and relationship backgrounds. Yet he also speaks to many of the failings of hyper-capitalism as he tries to represent average workers who have lost their jobs to bad trade deals and low-skilled immigration. He has also spoken to many of the failings of hyper-individualism as he has tried to protect religious liberties and a positive view of American history. And I think part of the reason that Trump was elected in both 2016 as well as 2024 is that he didn't speak like a traditional Republican or Democrat. He instinctively understood that Americans had given up on both parties to solve the major problems facing our country. Political and economic leaders of today think that they can solve America's toughest problems, but they are wrong. You see, the Cultural Revolution of the 60s converted Americans to a new religion that worships the self, shuns norms of family, community, and church, yet leaves them unfulfilled and lonely. And the Libertarian Revolution turned business and government leaders into ultra-wealthy oligarchs who show little regard for the welfare of average working Americans. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was useful in 1776 when there are no such things as hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism. I think one of the main points of Deneen's argument in why liberalism failed, though, is that we cannot look to the Founding Fathers to solve the problems of our toxic culture and our toxic economy today. We're a continent of 340 million rootless individuals who are no longer bound by culture, traditions, or what used to be known as the American dream. It's time for a new structural solution to America's divisiveness. It's time for us to consider the power of restraint against hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism. So, quick note, next week there's going to be a break in the show, but then we'll be coming back the following week to present this structural solution to America's brokenness, Convention of States, and the power of restraint. So, for today's call to action, in addition to Back to the Future, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking out the movie Reagan with Dennis Quaid. It will take you back in time, like another song by Huey Lewis and the News. Okay, have a great day.